everybody, and welcome to More Books with B. Sharice. I'm your host, B. Sharice Moore. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's a beautiful Monday. Today is the day that we are honoring the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which is actually the 15th, but today is the 18th, and today is the day that in the United States we celebrate and honor the memory of the late, great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And today, in the spirit of resistance, in the spirit of struggle, in the spirit of family and commitment and trust and protection, I am going to be reviewing Root Magic. Root Magic by Eden Royce. Root Magic. And as you can see by the way this book looks, I've been reading it diligently. I just finished it not too long ago, and really appreciating this masterpiece of a middle grade novel. So Root Magic by Eden Royce, this is her debut novel. It is a middle grade novel. So middle grade is roughly ages 11 to 13. All right, maybe 10 to 13. And you're thinking of your middle school years, but maybe grades 5 to grade 7. However, I've had a bunch of different conversations about what constitutes middle grade and what does not. And the age of the protagonist also has a little bit to do with it, if you ask some folks. And the protagonists in this story, Jezebel and Jay, who are twins, they are both 10 years old at the beginning of the book, and then they soon turn 11 years old. So you kind of want to keep the age of the protagonist in mind when you are choosing your audience for your book. So I would say this is perfect for 5th and 6th graders. So anyway, there are so many things that Eden Royce does well with this book. First and foremost, setting. So my roots are in New Jersey. That's where my family is from. However, my ancestors, of course, were enslaved Africans, but they settled in, well, I don't want to say settled, but they were enslaved on the plantation in North Carolina. So I grew up going to North Carolina each summer. And I remember one particular summer when I was maybe about 10 or 12 years old, I actually took a trip with my godmother to Kiowa Island, which is one of the coastal islands in South Carolina. I never forgot that experience. I also went to Charleston, and I just remember the richness of that place, the richness of this food, and it's something that never left me. And obviously I'm far more older than 12 years old or 10 years old whenever I went, and it stuck with me. And so in reading Root Magic, one of the things that I think is probably the success of the story, and there's so many successes, but one of the things that stuck with me is the setting. Eden Royce does a marvelous job of placing you on the South Carolina coast in a small, cabin. You have Doc's cabin. You also have the family cabin. So just the way she describes the smells, the food that the children eat, the smell of the area, the salt in the air, the marshes. It is just one of the richest books I think that I've ever read. And I completely enjoyed this journey of how I was transported to this place that I've never specifically been, and I didn't specifically grow up in. But it was a place that felt so familiar to me. And that just shows the undeniable talent of Eden Royce. Just the way that she is able to set the stage for a story is incredible. And I've been a fan of Eden Royce for quite some time. I've read several of her short stories. And it's just this richness. And she is of Geechee Gullah descent. And it shines through the setting. It shines through her characters. So I think that's one of the things that stuck with me, just the cornfields, the reeds, the trees, the cicadas, the pitch blackness, the heavy heat, the cool breezes that really stuck with me. Another thing is the character of Jezebel. So although you see, both Jay and Jez on the front cover, the story is told from Jezebel's perspective. And it's about a young girl who is coming of age. She's 10, she's just turned 11, by I think maybe chapter 3, I believe she turns 11. And she's experiencing grief and change. She's going to a new school with new classmates. She's just experienced the loss of her grandmother. And as someone who was extremely close to their grandmother, as Jezebel and Jay are in this book, I could absolutely feel the grief that she was feeling. And I lost my grandmother when I was an adult. I was 20 years old when my grandmother passed away. And so she was 10, Jezebel was 10 when her grandmother passed away. And when the book opens, immediately you get the rituals, the Geechee Gullah rituals, and you get the conversations about grief and Jezebel's inner thoughts about how different life is going to be without her grandmother, who was such a pillar in her family. And that's another thing that I loved about root magic. This discussion of elders and how important they are, specifically matriarchs, and how important they are in the Black family, is something that I don't often read about in YA literature. I guess it's touched upon, but I love the fact that the importance of the matriarch, the importance of family, was woven through this story so thickly. It was just a paramount topic. It was a running theme that I appreciated. I appreciated how, Doc, who is Jezebel and Jay's uncle, and their mother, how they all stuck together. And soon the young people, Jay and Jez, after begging and pleading, they learn root magic. And the magic is so real. And I have to also say that the magic in some places was truly terrifying to me, even as an adult. Again, there's a realism in the way that Eden Royce writes. And there is just as she, knows how to perfectly set a story, the magic that she includes is authentic. And this is the first time that I've ever read a novel, a YA novel, that has authentic magic in it. Again, she's from the community. She is Geechee Gullah. And that influence is stark. From talking about the devil's shoestrings, which I think was the first title of the book before it was changed to Root Magic, to the brick dust, to the hate blue color that both Jay and Jez have to paint the cabin, paint the house. All of that is steeped in root magic and steeped in the culture of Geechee Gullah. Another thing, the story is set in the 1960s. It's set in 1963. So you get a little bit of talk about segregation. There are several different layers of problems and conflict within the story. So there's conflicts with the sheriff's office, and there's an overreach of power that is happening in the community, something that is not uncommon in Black communities and communities of color today, that Eden Royce delves into, and the relationships and how Jez and Doc and Jay and Mama actually protect themselves from outside enemies, how they determine who to trust and who not to trust, and how all of that is woven into the time period. I also love the fact that Eden Royce talks a lot about class. She talks about class structure, which is always something that's missing in middle grade novels. I almost never see a discussion of class. It's rare, especially in spec fic. I think you get it in your realistic fiction novels. You'll see more about, you know, more along the lines of, you know, some very eminent and, you know, class discussions and that are, you know, in your face, and they're there, so you can't deny them. But in this book, Jez really has a hard time with the girls at school who are bullying her because of the way she dresses, because her family does root magic, and these girls are also Black, you know. And she says one of my favorite quotes in the book, and that's "all skin folk ain't kinfolk," you know, which is an old Zora Neale Hurston quote from Dust Tracks on the Road. And, you know, it has to be explained to Jez that, hey, you know, just because these other kids are Black, just because they look like you and share your skin color, does not mean that these girls are your friends. It doesn't mean that they're going to treat you nicely. So I don't want to give too much of the story away. All I will say is it is a lush journey. It's a coming of age story about a young girl who was dealing with grief. She's dealing with mourning her grandmother. She's also dealing with a new school. She's dealing with finding her own identity outside of her twin brother, you know, because she has many flashbacks throughout the story where she talks about, you know, Jez and Jay, you know, she and her brother before, you know, their grandmother's death. And I don't want to say that they were never separate individuals, but what I will say is they seem to share a lot more than they do now because things have changed. They're growing apart. They're growing older. And of course, she's a girl, he's a boy, and they're going to face different challenges. They're going to feel and experience different things because of their gender. So I haven't been doing this lately, but when I first started this channel, I would give suggestions on, you know, mini lessons that you could do with your students if you'd like to read this as a read aloud or assign it to your students. And one of the things that I've been doing over the past several years is I've been researching a little bit about the Geechee Gullah area, and I've learned a lot about the gentrification that has been happening for years, you know, where many of the Geechee Gullah people are losing their land, and it is a problem. And there are groups that are fighting against it. There are groups that are actually taking back their land and attempting to preserve it, and they have been successful. So what I would suggest is that you have your students, have your young people do some research on these very current events, you know, of the gentrification and the land grab that's happening along the South Carolina coast. And have them think about that, have them think about gentrification, and have them tie that into the story, and have them tie that into the constant interactions that the Turner family experiences with the police, because they do have experiences with the police throughout the novel. All right. So again, please pick up Root Magic by Eden Royce. Fantastic novel. Again, just extremely rich and intriguing. Lots of great twists and turns that are really unexpected. And there's a little bit of some frightening moments in there as well. So I just want to warn you there if you have anybody that's a little squeamish. So just let them know that. And again, a very rich and endearing novel that I truly enjoyed from front to finish. So thank you so much for tuning in to More Books with B. Sharice. I'm your host, B. Sharice Moore. I will be back next week with another book. But until then, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Enjoy your day.